All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Reyes Reflection podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we sit down with people across entertainment and beyond to hear their stories and their experiences and what truly makes them them. You can listen on all major platforms, and if you want more content and updates, please make sure you follow me at the social medias at I'm Nathanael Reyes. Now let's get into it. Today's guest is someone whose career really speaks for itself, decades in the industry, an abundance of roles, and a presence you've definitely seen whether you realize it or not. From early work like Gentle Ben to films like Apollo 13, Austin Powers, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, television programs like Key and Peele and My Name is Earl, and stepping into intense projects like Terrifier 3 and many Rob Zombie films. He's built one of the most unique and lasting careers in Hollywood, and we're actually catching him at a great time right in the middle of his birthday week. So I appreciate him for taking time to sit and chat with me. Clint, the Ice Cream Man Howard, welcome to the Reyes Reflection podcast.
Well, thank you, Nathaniel. I really appreciate that. That was one heck of an opening and an introduction, and thank you. Yes, and it is my birthday week. The week, it's just April 20th was my birthday, and so anyway, yeah, that's we're on kind of a whirlwind trip. My wife and my daughter and I, we went to Manchester, England. We were there for about a week, and now we turned around. We came back to the States, and we're in Marshfield, Missouri, participating in a cherry blossom festival, at which point after another 3 or 4 days here, we'll get on one more airplane and fly back home to see our cats and see our dogs and enjoy a little peace and quiet around the Howard household.
Yeah. What, were you in the UK because of your birthday, or were you there for work?
No, well, work. No, I wouldn't really call it work. It was, we went to a horror convention. There's an outfit over there called Monopoly that they put on horror conventions, and their horror convention is called For the Love of Horror. So anyway, we in Manchester, England. It was really wonderful. Listen, it was planes, trains, and automobiles. We literally got in all of those to get to Manchester, but they treated us really, really well. The fans were great. The English accent, it's always very pleasant, especially after a hectic day of traveling.
Yeah.
You get there, and everybody sounds so pleasant. Everybody seems so nice. It is just such a pleasant country to be in. Now, I'm sure there are people that sound like this that are real bastards, but no, we love the people, and Kat and our daughter Rafi and I, we made a little family trip out of it. And the only wrinkle is literally the day before I go on this trip, one of my crowns fell out. So it was not enough time. It was not enough time to go and visit the dentist. So I basically had to put my crown into a little Ziploc bag, put it in my drawer, and we're going to deal with it when I get home. So people are getting, I don't know, how many teeth do you have in the human body? How many you got? About 26 chompers? No, there's more than that. I'm down a chiclet. I'm down a chiclet at this point.
But you know what? Still rocking the great smile. You're still on the show, and I'm glad that you're making an appearance despite the fact you could have said, hey, I don't look my Sunday best, so let's wait. But you decided to go ahead and rock and roll, so I'm excited for that. Thank you again, because time is truly the best gift you can give someone, so the fact that you're giving me some means a lot to me.
Listen, I appreciate that, Daniel. And there's an old expression that I've heard for a long time in show business, and that is they can fix it in post. If somebody wants to add a tooth, they can add a tooth. If somebody wants to take a couple of teeth away, it's no problem. In this day and age, it's no problem. So anyway, no, listen, I have, every human being has some vanity, but my vanity is, I don't know, it's pretty low on the totem pole for me. And I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and to get the stories and get the anecdotes on the record. I appreciate that. And so let's go ahead and shoot.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, so you have been in the industry for many years, decades. Do you remember what you were like as a kid before acting even was a thing for you?
No, I don't remember when I wasn't an actor. I don't remember my first auditions. I don't remember my first jobs. I started when I was 2 years old. My first day of work was, I believe it was December 7th of 1961. So I was 2.5 years old. And I did an episode of the Andy Griffith Show. And of course, I don't have memory of it. I just know through storytelling and through my parents, Rance and Gene Howard, telling me about my early journey, that's the way it was. I made an appearance on the Andy Griffith Show, and that led to, I think, 4 more appearances on the Andy Griffith Show, which then led to other opportunities to work in the business. Because from what my knowledge about the whole situation is, once the business sees that there's a kid that is not intimidated by the process, I wasn't petrified by the camera. I was comfortable and relaxed. I followed direction. So I started working. I did, when I was very, very young, I did an episode of The Fugitive. I did a couple episodes of a television show called Please Don't Eat the Daisies. I did a couple of pilots. One was called Breaking Point. And now, boy, at 67 years old, my memory is kind of escaping me a little bit. But I worked quite a bit early. And then I had a couple of big breaks. In like 1965, I had a really nice break. And then that led to another thing that I did, which was an episode of Bonanza, where I had a great role. I played a little boy that was hunting for God, and it was called All Ye His Saints. And for all those aficionados that want to take a deep dive into old television, it's an episode that you can get at Amazon. Bonanza. You can view all the episodes on Bonanza. And this episode was called All Ye His Saints, and it was the first year that Bonanza had gone color. And so I was the star of the episode, and then all of a sudden the business understood that, hey, this kid can do it. So I've been continuing to work ever since.
Yeah, I've stepped into some acting and it can be intimidating even for adults. So I can see why the industry sees a little kid who has some confidence and they just want to put him in projects. And it's kind of crazy how you were thrown into projects while you were still in toddler diapers. Like that's as far as you can remember.
I give all the credit, absolutely all the credit, first of all, to my mom and dad, and my dad specifically, Rance Howard, because he was the one that was sort of the child actor whisperer. Um, you know, he obviously had a magic touch. He had a magic touch with my brother, and he had a magic touch with me because he made it very comfortable for me to do what I needed to do as an actor, which was bring my emotions out, bring the reality of what I needed to do as an actor out there, and not be ashamed of showing emotion, not be ashamed of expressing myself. And my dad made it very comfortable for me. I didn't think twice about it. I didn't think twice about the process of being an actor. And of course, it was my dad that was kind of my mentor. He was my inculcator, but he had the support of mom. I mean, we all had the support of mom. My mom, Jean Frances Howard, was an absolute rock. And so, the two of them made it very easy for me. Plus, of course, then I've got to give a big, giant shout out to God because listen, I didn't choose my parents, and I ended up with a couple of great parents. I didn't choose my situation. I didn't choose what happened, and yet God has made it, you know, a wonderful experience for me to be on this earth, and I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, counting your blessings, knowing the areas in which you're blessed in, for sure. That's incredible that you are well versed in knowing that internally. Going back to some of your earlier roles, like Gentle Ben, would you say that that was your big break? And if so, what stands out to you now that didn't back then when you were on on like your earlier sets?
Well, you know, I had been on a television series prior to Gentle Ben, and I auditioned for Gentle Ben. That's one thing that, like, most people don't understand is, I mean, I've auditioned all of my life. It's part of the job. In fact, my mom used to say that is the job. The job is to audition, and actually, the work is just the gravy. It's the whipped cream on top of the sundae is the actual job. But I don't know. It was second nature to me. I enjoyed it. All the things of working with the animals. I mean, that was an obstacle and a challenge that Dad had prepared me for. And also, it wasn't just Dad at the time. There was a guy named Rico Browning who was very, very important in my life. Ivan Torres was the producer of Gentle Ben, and he had a wonderful team of people that created a wonderful working environment. I still, to this day, know, like, the sound man's name was Howard Warren, the cinematographer's name was Howard Winter, Rico Browning worked on the show. Jack Cowden was the script supervisor. Peggy Kunkel was the wardrobe lady. All of these people, they were part of this team. That's one thing people don't understand about entertainment is when I was a 7-year-old boy working on Gentle Ben, of course, I was standing there next to the bear. Sunday night, 7 o'clock on CBS, it was Clint Howard, Dennis Weaver, Beth Brickell on Gentle Ben. But there were dozens and dozens of people that were really, really took a lot of responsibility and took great care in helping manufacture this entertainment. Like I was mentioning these people, the camera people, Jimmy Pergola. Jimmy Pergola was the cameraman. He wasn't the cinematographer, but he was the guy that actually operated the camera. So he was the human being that was closest to me most of the time, and the connection that I developed with him was beautiful. So it was a nice team effort, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me to be on a show. The public recognized me. It was a unique show. There's only been 2 shows. There's been 3 shows on television that featured a bear. One was Gentle Ben, one was Grizzly Adams, and one was called BJ and the Bear. BJ and the Bear was a television series that lasted for a couple of years. So anyway, but I was the first one. Mm-hmm. Here I was, a 7 or 8-year-old boy, every Sunday night on television, CBS, doing scenes with a bear.
Yeah. Very different than most kids' upbringing, right? Most kids on Sunday are doing soccer practice, and here you are on a set with a real life bear.
Yeah, I mean, Nathanael, let me go a little deeper on this because,
please,
listen, all of my life I've been an actor, so I've understood what it takes. Yep. And you have to absorb a tremendous amount of rejection.
Yes.
Because when you audition, and I started auditioning when I was 4 or 5 years old. I mean, I would go into a room and there'd be 10 or 12 or 15 other kids. And I knew right away there was going to be one winner and there was going to be a room full of losers. And I don't want to be a loser. Now, of course, psychologically, you would say, no, we're all winners. We're getting to participate in the business and this and that. But the fact is, somebody's going to get the job. And then there's going to be people that don't get the job. So there's the rejection issue that you have to deal with, which is huge. It's huge. At my very best as an actor, I probably batted about 200, which means I would get 2 jobs for every 10 jobs I went on to audition, which, that means 8 times out of 10, thanks, but no thanks, you're not a winner, right. And I was able to deal with it. And I'm telling this story to lead to the fact that Gentle Ben was only on for 2 years. We were a hit show the first year. The second show, we were opposite Disney. And Disney threw all their movies because The Wonderful World of Disney was a program that was on Sunday night. And Disney did not like losing to Gentle Ben, so they loaded the lineup with all their hit shows, all their movies. And Gentle Ben slipped in the ratings. And meanwhile, Ivan Torres, the producer of the show, was having trouble with other parts of his businesses. And so he asked CBS for more money. And CBS said, no, we're not going to give you more money, Ivan. And as a matter of fact, we're not going to give you any money at all because we're changing the direction that we're were doing as far as television. They got out of, at that time, this is in the late 60s, the networks wanted to go more urban. The country shows, which they considered Gentle Ben a family show. Lassie got canceled. Gentle Ben got canceled. So those country shows all got cut. So all of a sudden, I'd been on a hit show for 2 years, and I had to hear from my dad that we don't have to worry about going down to Florida. We got canceled, and it hurt me. I thought, this is good. I love being on Gentle Ben. I love going down to Florida and working. I like being with the bear. I like being with the other animals. And all of a sudden that stopped, you know, and I felt like, well, that's kind of shitty, you know. Well, for whatever reason, um, and I'm sure it has something to do with what God's gifts to me were. I kind of have a Teflon psyche to where, yeah, it hurt, but then, and also mom and dad. Mom was really good at being positive about this stuff. Something better is going to come along. Something, you know. And okay, so Gentle Ben had gotten canceled. And I went back to school. And the next thing you know, I hear that Ron and I are going to get to play brothers in a film. And it was a wonderful thing. It was a movie called The Wild Country, directed by a guy named Bob Totten. Vera Miles played my mother. Steve Forrest played our father. And Ron played my brother. Jack Elam was in it. It was a great cast. It was kind of a forgettable movie, but it was, you know, a great experience. So all of a sudden, I went from being on Gentle Ben to not on Gentle Ben. But all of a sudden, I got another great job where we got to spend the summer in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And meanwhile, I got to go back to school. I got to play Little League Baseball. I got to do a lot of other things that normal kids did. And the sting of being shut out of Gentle Ben just dissipated.
Mm-hmm.
Onward and upward with other adventures.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up a lot there, and another actor that I interviewed, he said you're a full-time auditioner, part-time actor, because you are always going to these, and you brought it up about how, you were batting 200, right? Like, you are going to get more no's than you are yeses in the industry, and I think when people see the industry, they think it's just this, easygoing, you're going to go ahead and get the role. It's not always like that. And so, you discuss your family ties, and I have some questions about that. But what a great experience to be able to essentially live a normal life. You were able to go back, play baseball, do all the normal things at the same time of doing what you love. So what a great experience for you to be able to have both, essentially.
Yes, and listen, I I've been married to Kat, my wife, now for going on 6 years. We have a daughter. She I met my daughter when she was about 9 or 10 years old, and I've known Rafi now for 6 or 7 years, and I love her. She's a great kid, and she's done some acting, and she hasn't done a lot of huge things, but she's worked. She did a lot of student films, and she worked in a couple of small little films, and she likes to act. She's a great entertainer. She's a great dancer. She's a great musician, and she's got some pretty good chops as an actress. She's going to be in this movie that I did called Another Ice Cream Man. Not I did. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it this summer. Another Ice Cream Man. But anyway, I've tried to gently instill in her, hey, there's rejection. You've got to learn to keep your mind occupied, because there's you can't just, it's a great, I've never heard it that way. You're a part-time actor, a full-time auditioner. And not everybody can handle that. And my mom got out of the business when she was an ingenue, because she didn't like the competition. She didn't like the rejection. Now, my mom got back into acting when she was in her early 50s. And then she enjoyed acting for 15 or 20 years before she got heart problems and passed away. But I've been gently. I don't want to throw a wet blanket on anybody's dreams, but it's hard. Being an actor is not easy, because it seems like it's fun. It seems like red carpets and nice clothes and friendly smiles and everybody putting their arm around you and telling you how great you are. But there is stuff that's not quite so pleasant. And me as a dad having to balance. Of course, I want to see my daughter. I want to see her dreams come true, but I also want to see her live a nice, full life. And it might not be in front of the camera. It might be behind the camera. It might have nothing to do with show business. I mean, listen, most people that start out being an actor, they end up doing something else in the business. Be creative. Wardrobe, makeup,
Yeah.
lighting, camera. There's a myriad of jobs in the entertainment business. And one thing I will say about the entertainment business, and for all young people who dream of being in the entertainment business, it's not easy. And yet there are literally dozens of jobs available, dozens and dozens of jobs available that are in the atmosphere of the entertainment business that you can do and have a wonderful life doing it. And the one thing that my dad taught me, because my dad grew up in the Depression, and when people didn't have a pot to piss in, when they only had a couple of nickels, they would use one of those nickels to go to the movie theater. No matter how times are, people want to be entertained. And if you have the ability to entertain people, by God, you do have a commodity. And never forget that. Even through all the whole AI bullshit, even the fact that now when you look, you can see that they can artificially create an actor. They can artificially create a voice. They can artificially create an image of a person, but it still lacks the human soul.
Oh
And
yeah.
for that, they need people like me, and down the road in a few years, they're going to need somebody like Rafi. And Kat and I are doing our very best to try to encourage her to smartly pursue her dream.
Yeah. That's a great piece of advice because you're right. Like there are a lot of jobs, there are a lot of things that make a production what it is. There's so much that goes behind it, and you're right. Like people can use that as a creative outlet. So I appreciate that you gave that advice and that input, not only for your daughter, but for everybody who listens to this episode and just hearing it and being like, look, I'm a well established actor and I'm telling you how challenging it is.
Well, yeah, and God, as we're getting ready to make another Ice Cream Man, which is this horror movie not based on, but I was in 1995. I was in a movie called Ice Cream Man,
Yep.
and it sticks in people's minds, and it's been something that I've been able to enjoy the fruits of having been in. And we're going to make this other movie, and I'm going to co-direct the movie. And there are literally there's 10 very, very important creative jobs involved in making a movie. The prop man, the person that friggin' their job is to get and maintain all the props of the movie. There's dozens of props and they all need to be cool. If you've got a shitty prop, you've got a shitty scene. So you got to have a good prop man. Set dressing, art director, you know. I mean, my God, set dressing, the way a room looks is a character unto itself. In our movie, the lead character lives in an old burnout ice cream parlor. Well, that ice cream parlor is a character that somebody is responsible for creating, and that person is the art director. So there's a job. Wardrobe, makeup. If you've got a shitty makeup person, you're not going to have nearly as an effective actor, you know. So anyway, there's all sorts of things, and yeah, acting is fun. The one thing I will say about acting, it's the only job on a set where they give you a dressing room. And I'm a big believer in the nap. And prop men can't take naps.
Yeah.
The makeup man can't take a nap. An actor can take a nap. So,
Recharge those
I'm just being
batteries.
truthful.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's a 20-minute nap.
Yep. Yeah. We'll transition now into your family ties. You brought it up, your brother Ron Howard. You also your niece is Bryce Dallas Howard. How has being part of a family that's so connected to film and storytelling shaped the way you think about the industry?
It grounds me. First of all, you missed one. Bryce has a sister. She's got two sisters. One of her sisters has pursued acting, and her name is Paige Howard. And Paige is a wonderful talent. Out of any of Ron's kids, Paige resembles my mom more than anybody. And I love Paige. I love all the kids. I love Jocelyn. I love Reed. I love Bryce. But Paige is really cool, and she's going to be in another Ice Cream Man. She's a great. I hope to God I hope to God I do her justice, because as a director, I want to make her come off as good as possible. And so anyway, that's the director's job. And hold on a second, let me grab this real quick. There's my niece. That's Paige. She's going to play a detective in the movie. Not that guy. That guy's name's Mars Crane. He's a good guy too. But there's my loving niece, Paige. And so anyway, she's going to be in it. But getting back to your question, it grounds me because it reminds me, and I'm thinking about Ron at this point. He considers himself a story smith. His job as a director is to tell a story. His job as a filmmaker is to find a story, figure out how best to tell it, and then execute the telling of the story. And so, that he's done that, and that's what we're doing. All of us in the entertainment business, we're telling stories, and some of them are true, some of them are fantasies, some of them are fake, some of them are real, some of them are funny, some of them are horrifying, but we're all storytellers. A little bit like sitting around a campfire when the elders, long before there was television, long before there was radio, the elders would sit around a fire and tell the youngins stories. And sometimes the stories would be about little elves. Sometimes the stories would be about, spooky creatures that lived in the woods. It depends where you heard the stories. If we were outside camping, the stories would end up being about bloodthirsty creatures. Or if the stories were around Christmas time, it would be about old Saint Nick. So anyway, we're just storytellers, and and I want to tell uplifting stories. I want to tell stories that spark people's imagination and make people think. There's plenty of stories that just are numbing. There's plenty of stories that all they do is just blindly entertain. The goal is to make people smile and think at the same time. My dad was the ultimate longevity person in the entertainment business. He broke in when he was probably 20 years old, and he worked continuously till he passed away at age 88 years old. And in fact, I worked with him on the last thing that he did. He was a remarkable man. He took every job that got offered. As long as it was a union job, he took it. He loved to act. He loved to pass along this joy of acting to his children, Ron and I, and his grandchildren. It's hard. He took it seriously. But my dad grew up a farm boy. My dad grew up on a farm. He was the firstborn son of a farmer. And the expectation of my dad was that he was going to be a farmer. And my dad got the bug to be in show business when he was about 12 or 13 years old. And God bless his mother for really letting him go. My Grandma Ethel Beckenholt, she was the one that apparently gave my dad the blessing, along with Granddad, to go off and pursue his dream. And in fact, when Dad was making the decision to pursue show business, he recalls his dad telling him something that is very emotional. Well, Harold, because that was my dad, Rance Howard. My dad, before he was Rance Howard, his name was Harold Beckenholt. Well, Harold, if you go through life, you better do something that you like, because you better find something that you like to do, because it sure ain't farming. My granddad gave my dad the out. He said, "Listen, go find something you love to do," and you know what my granddad did by letting dad go was something that will forever be grateful for. One thing that Ron and I we talk about it. We wrote a book about it. Ron and I wrote a book called The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family. And in that book, it was kind of a love letter to mom and dad. And we both remarked that what they did to want to pursue their dreams of being in the entertainment business and do something else besides be a farmer or be the daughter of a butcher. Because that my mom was the daughter of a butcher in a small town in Duncan, Oklahoma. But they were dreaming bigger than that. And for them to start out from Oklahoma in the late 40s and venture to New York City to break into show business and have the audacity to do it, um, I'll forever be grateful, because listen, Ron and I laugh about this all the time. My dad had no business doing it. My dad was a hick. My dad, I would, if I was standing there watching at the time, I would have given my dad no chance to do what he did. And not only did he do it, he's a Hall of Fame human being in show business. You talk about the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've come across that have worked with my dad. Everybody stops and talks about how what a wonderful man he was, and so what a legacy.
That must be encouraging for you to just hear that and embrace him and be like, wow, my dad's legacy is lived through the testament of his hard work and his personality and his disposition to people. That's got to be incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's a little humbling because I'm not nearly the man that my dad was. I'm just not. I mean, probably a little more creative than my dad. I'm funnier than my dad, but I'm not the man that my dad was. And that's okay, because very few human beings on this earth, Nathaniel, are as good a human being as my dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, longevity in any profession is hard. So the fact that you learned that from your dad at a young age when he wanted to pursue it, when you hear these stories of him wanting to pursue it at 12 to 13 years old, and then you took it upon yourself, because again, longevity in any profession is hard. So the fact that you're still doing projects shows how much you truly love it. So I want to talk about some of your specific roles that you've done, because you've played comedic characters, drama characters. I some of the funny ones I have is like creepy Rodney on My Name Is Earl. Like you've been through it all. You've been on Key and Peele sketches. You've been in Arrested Development, and you've done horror. So let's talk about some of your specific roles now. Star Trek. I've got to ask, what's the secret behind the Tranya? What's the secret behind that?
Well, there was no secret. It was pink grapefruit juice, and it was warm, and it came out of a can. And I was 6 or 7 years old at the time, and I hated pink grapefruit juice. And so when you see the scene, if you go back on YouTube and you look at the scene, I barely sip it. It's like here I am. I play this commander of this spaceship all by myself, and I have advanced intelligence, and I'm lonely. I want to have people. I enjoy people, and I enjoy these people, and so I'm offering them Tranya. Tranya, but first the Tranya, and they're hesitant because they don't know whether they're going to get poisoned by me. But finally, Commander Baylock, he says, "But first the Tranya," and I go like this, and I barely take a sip. And it seems like that I'm enjoying a nice liqueur, some sort of alien liqueur, right? No, it tasted so bad in my mouth that I only could take a sip. Now I remember this specifically, Nathaniel, on the day that we were filming. I didn't know what they were going to have in the Tranya. I didn't know what they were going to do. And when it showed up pink grapefruit juice, I'm going, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I wasn't saying that at the time.
Yeah.
But Can't they put anything else in it? I mean, I loved apple juice. I'm friggin' apple juice. How about put some apple juice in that carafe, and then we can do a proper toast.
Yeah.
Well, no, my dad said no. You're gonna drink the pink grapefruit juice, and you're gonna like it. Well, of course I wasn't gonna like it, but it worked out perfect.
Yeah.
Because if it had been apple juice, I would have thrown it back. I would have, I would have gone like this,
Yeah.
which wouldn't have played. What played is I sipped it like it was, a fine intergalactic cognac or something.
Yes.
So anyway, it was. I do have memories. That was 60 years ago.
Yeah.
That was. We're getting ready. We're getting ready to go do the 60th anniversary of Star Trek. They have a big convention in Las Vegas where Creation Entertainment throws this big convention and they celebrate Star Trek. They've been doing it for years and years and years. And I've been to a few of them, but this is going to be special because it was 60 years ago and Shatner and I were there. I mean, Shatner's going to be there. There's a few other actors that were there from the beginning, but not many. But I'm one of them. And so anyway, going to go there for 3 or 4 days and celebrate Star Trek. And it's something that for a long time I didn't appreciate. I almost kind of rejected when I was young. In fact, I have a quick story if we can do this.
Please.
Okay. I'd been on Star Trek. Several years later, I was 17 years old, and I got an audition. Speaking of auditions, I got an audition to be in a movie called Star Wars. And I didn't know anything about it, really. I did know that George Lucas had directed my brother in American Graffiti. So I knew who George Lucas was. And I heard there was going to be some sort of big space movie. And I got an audition to read for the role of Luke Skywalker. So, okay, it was an adult role. And they were seeing everybody. I go down to the 20th Century lot, and there was dozens of actors standing around. It was like, it wasn't a cattle call, but it was a lot of actors. I saw Mark Hamill, because I knew who Mark Hamill was because I had auditioned for other parts throughout the last few years. He had been a young actor. He'd been a child actor. So I saw him. I saw other people that I recognized. There were a lot of actors there. And I went into the audition room after waiting outside for a long time. And I look into the room and I see Francis Coppola there. Francis was a friend of George's from way back, but I didn't know who was going to be in the room. Francis was in the room. Fred Roos, who I knew, Fred Roos had been like a casting associate on the Andy Griffith Show. And I knew him, and I knew another guy in the room. His name was Gino Havens. And Gino Havens had been a kind of a personal confidant of George Lucas. Now, I didn't recognize George. I did not recognize George. I didn't see George there at the time. So I look at the room. I see Francis. That takes my breath away. I see Gino Havens and Fred Roos. And George was spun around in a big leather chair like this. And he spins around to face me. He looks me right in the eye and he goes, "Commander Baylock, Corbomite maneuver." Now, he is now bringing up a job I did when I was a baby. Here I am, a young man trying to get an adult role in a movie, and he is recalling something I did when I was just a handful of years removed from pooping in my pants. And it threw me off, and I didn't like it. And in my mind, I swear to God, in my mind, I said to myself, "George, get a fucking life." Because I didn't understand the implications. I didn't understand the implications of how important Star Trek was to the world.
Right.
It was important. It was important. Star Trek was important enough for George to have him go, "I'm going to do one called Star Wars."
Yeah.
And so anyway, I didn't get the audition. They hired the right guy. Mark was wonderful as an actor, and he's a good guy. And for him to get to be Luke Skywalker was wonderful. And I had that moment. I met and had spent time with George a couple of times in my life, and I asked him if he remembers my audition, and he said he didn't. But for him to look me in the eye and go, "Commander Baylock, Corbomite maneuver." George, what are you doing? Anyway, that was I didn't appreciate what Star
Yeah.
Trek meant. And it wasn't until I got into my 50s that I really started to understand the power of storytelling. What what the Star Trek people were able to do, Gene Roddenberry and all the creative people that invented Star Trek, the same as all the creative people, including Andy Griffith and Aaron Rubin and Sheldon Leonard, that created the Andy Griffith Show. They left an impression on humanity that will forever be there. As I go around the country, it, you know, people will still say, "You were in the Andy Griffith Show. You were in Star Trek," and I used to think that was a bad thing, and now
Right.
I don't. I appreciate it. I am so grateful to be a part of it, And listen, sometimes I have to get reminded, and that's why my wife reminds me from time to time. If I start to get kind of an attitude, she makes me right sized. Cat is, and also just our life, the life in general. I mean, having a 16-year-old daughter, that keeps you freaking humble.
Yeah.
My
Because
God.
you know nothing. You know nothing. She knows
Oh,
everything. Yeah.
and in many respects, that's a true statement because what I know, regardless of what I think it's worth, is not important because she's the one. Our daughter, Rafi, is the one that is going to carry the torch. And instead of trying to correct her all the time, I need to sort of, encourage. Of course, being a parent, there is a little correction that has to happen. And listen, like I said, I was kind of slow. I didn't meet her till she was 10 years old, but I'm in the dad game now, and I plan to stay there.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So in another life, you are Luke Skywalker. No, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But no, it is really incredible to hear what sticks with people and what doesn't stick with people because when you were on set on Star Trek, you never knew 50 years later, half a century later, that people would still be so connected to a project that you did back then. So it is interesting to see what sticks, what doesn't stick. And so, like, you even talked about Ice Cream Man, right? Like, there's people that talk about that. And so I have some other roles that you've done that people will probably still say, "Hey, Clint, I recognize you from this." And so, I want to talk about how the Grinch Stole Christmas because you were part of one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time. Definitely one that's a staple during that season. And you were part of a project where you had to wear prosthetics on your face. Is this true?
Oh yeah, I had about 3 hours of makeup every day. Every
Yeah.
day,
Talked
I
about
had
how
to get.
brutal it was.
Well, it wasn't brutal. Brutal is friggin', doing Caltrans duty when you got a ticket you're trying to get removed. Brutal is picking up trash in the hot sun by the side of the freeway. That's brutal. Being an actor, sitting in a makeup chair, I had the pleasure and privilege. Every actor, every principal actor had their own makeup guy. It just makes sense. There was 25 makeup men on the set every day because my make it took 3 hours to get into it, and it always took fixing, and they would always have to futz with the makeup because there was a prosthetic piece here, there were prosthetic ears, some people had prosthetic forehead, um, hair, hair piece, and of course the fat outfit. It was, it took over 3 hours to get into everything. But I had the pleasure of being with a young guy, young makeup man. His name was Christian Tinsley. I say he was. His name is still Christian Tinsley. He's gone ahead and had a Hall of Fame career in the motion picture business as a makeup artist. And it he did the makeup for Passion of the Christ. He's done
Wow.
makeup. He did all the tattoos. He did all the tattoos on Ed Norton. He invented. He invented something. This Christian Tinsley. First of all, when I worked with him, he was in his early 20s, and all he wanted to do was just be a makeup man. He loved what he did, and he considered himself not an artist. He considered himself a cosmetics enthusiast because he
Okay.
loved putting stuff together, and he was really good at putting prosthetic stuff in and gluing stuff on, and then using what do they call that? The airbrush. He had, so he was all good at that. We would have hours of conversation because we did it for 3 months, 3 or 4 days a week. I was sitting with him for 3 hours a day, just shooting the shit. And I remember the day that we talked about, makeup men weren't really artists. Makeup men and makeup women, I wouldn't really call what a makeup man does art. He's a craftsman. But like the same way, in fact, I'll never forget when Christian made this analogy. He said, it's no different. What he does is no different than putting together and gluing together and painting a model airplane. He's like, what do they call them? They don't call somebody that puts together a model airplane an artist. He's a hobby enthusiast. So we were laughing and we started calling all the makeup people enthusiasts. And in fact, there was one woman, Tony G, who was an extraordinary makeup person. Tony G. She did makeup on the very top level of the business. And she got really bent out of shape when she heard us saying that makeup people weren't artists. They were cosmetics enthusiasts. So anyway, what Christian has done with his career and his life was amazing. He invented the Tinsley transfer, which what he did is he started making tattoos that like the transfer tattoos, the temporary tattoos. He would make them like scars and burns and bullet holes. He was the first guy to do that. And now if you go into any Halloween shop, you can put a temporary tattoo on your face. It looks like you got a bullet hole. Well, Christian invented that. He invented that out of necessity because he was doing the makeup. He was like a background makeup person on Pearl Harbor, and his job was to put like burns and scars on extras, and it was just killing him. And he got the idea. Why can't we just use tattoos? Instead of doing a tattoo that looks like a tattoo, you do a tattoo that looks like a burn. And so he invented it and ended up doing really nice for himself. He was the one. It's full circle because just a year or so ago, I worked on a movie called Terrifier 3, and they hired Damien Leone hired Christian to be the makeup guy for Terrifier 3. Damien, who was the creator of Terrifier, he had always done the makeup. He had been the director and the makeup guy, but he knew that on this movie they needed to take it to the next level, and they hired Christian to do Art the Clown's makeup and all the gore makeup, and Christian loved the challenge, and it's they're doing really good. They've done really good, and they're getting ready to make Terrifier 4. I see Terrifier brings a smile to your face.
So yeah, no, I have the questions on it. Yeah, that movie was insane. I mean, definitely, definitely an interesting movie, and I have some questions on that. But let me wrap up on the Grinch, and then we'll go to that. So I want to know your reaction the first time you saw Jim Carrey in full transformation of the Grinch. What was Clint's first reaction when he saw that?
Well, let's go backwards a minute. I
Okay.
first saw Jim Carrey play. I first saw Jim Carrey playing the Grinch when he was in Bermuda shorts and thongs and a T-shirt on a rehearsal stage at Universal Studios. Because for about a week they rehearsed the movie, and
Mhm.
Jim was not in makeup, you know. And I remember after the first day, I go to my brother. I go, "Hey, Ron, don't you think that's a little big? Don't you think that's a little goofy?" This is a little known but true story.
Yeah.
They were considering to offer the role of the Grinch to Jack Nicholson. They at the time they thought that Jack would be a good Grinch, and Jack considered it. Jack really didn't want to get into the makeup, and he didn't. And then Jim had been in a movie that just went over the top, and it became obvious that that Universal really wanted to have Jim Carrey in the movie. That Jack would have been a great, interesting choice, but that Jim was the guy. And so in this rehearsal stage, I thought Jim was really broad. I thought it wasn't going to work. Too silly, too goofy. My God, that's not the Grinch we were all imagining.
Yeah.
he gets into the makeup. The first day I see him work, it's brilliant. And watching Jim for about 3 months work as the Grinch was one of the most refreshing, positive things I've ever seen on a movie set. Because first of all, I had the experience of spending 3 hours in a makeup chair. He spent 4.5 hours in a makeup chair. Every day that Jim worked, the first 4.5 hours of his day was sitting in a chair like this, letting him put glue and rubber on his face. Now, he's claustrophobic. Jim fought.
I heard.
Jim fought having the shit on his face every day. He had issues, but they put all this glue on his face, all this rubber, the hair. They put him into a big green fat wetsuit, and they marched him out to stage. And the last thing they tell him to do is to be funny. Well, the last thing you want to be when you've got all that shit attached to you is funny. And yet what Jim was able to do was fucking brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The beautiful thing about it is I didn't really have a chance. He's very, as best as he could, he was smoking cigarettes at the time. It was kind of funny to see the Grinch smoking an American Spirit because, it's just one of those things. If you got him, smoke them, and he needed to smoke them. So Jim would be smoking a cigarette on the set in full Grinch makeup. Oh, not only all the makeup, then they put contact lenses in his eyes.
Yeah, those yellow ones.
It was just, But after the show, the next movie he did was a movie called Fun with Dick and Jane. And the casting directors hired me for a day or 2 days on a movie called Fun with Dick and Jane. And Jim, I got to sit around the set and talk to Jim without makeup. And he was such a lovely guy. He's so smart and he's so inventive and he's so fun to be around that I, not working with him on the Grinch was awesome, but getting to be with him for several hours on the set of Fun with Dick and Jane was also a blast.
Yeah. Can you shed any light on if it's true that, because there's internet rumors that he had some sort of SWAT guy who was accustomed to torture? Can you shed any light on that? Do you know if that happens to be true? There's internet rumors about it, so I'm just curious. Do you happen to know if that's true?
I know the truth because I was in the foxhole. The truth was he was having trouble. He tore out of his makeup several times. He literally, claustrophobia means freaking, and as he tore out of the makeup, he would tear and ruin the hair pieces. These are full hair pieces that took weeks to make. And he tore out of the second to last hairpiece that had been made for him. And they were feverishly making more, but it was going to take weeks to make these hairpieces. And Rick Baker went to my brother and said, listen, we got a problem. If he tears out one more hairpiece, we're going to have to shut down because we can't put him into makeup and hair because he doesn't have any hair. And Ron had to go to Jim and say, listen, Jim, we understand what you're going through. I know it's terrible. It's hard. I know you're having trouble. But the fact is if you tear out one more hairpiece, we're going to have to sue you. And the threat of that becoming an issue, that they were going to have to shut down, I don't think they used the word sue, but the idea was if there was one guy responsible for having to shut down the movie, they're going to have to seek a remedy. And that remedy would have been going after it. And so Ron's partner, Brian Grazer, had just met with a CIA operative who had been a trainer for CIA agents. And part of that training was teaching CIA operatives how to handle being kidnapped. And when you get in the real world, when you get kidnapped, they isolate you. They don't give you anything. They tie your hands and you're in a dark room with a hood over you and it tends to drive people insane. And the way to handle that sort of insanity when you're being held kidnapped is if you can find a couple of pebbles and roll them around in your hand, it helps. It grounds you, and it helps keep you on this earth, so to speak. So Brian set up a time where this CIA guy, this trainer, went and talked to Jim. And they gave Jim a couple of those brass balls, like those executive tension balls. And Jim had these little tension balls that he would roll in his hand. When he started to get nervous about being claustrophobic, he would play with these balls, and he didn't tear out, whether it was these little balls that did it or the threat of possible legal action. Jim didn't have any more issues tearing out any more makeup, and it was so hard what he did. Listen, regardless of any mental condition that might make you nervous about being in a tight space, just having all that makeup on, and then they tell you to be funny. It's just, yeah, right. I'm going to be funny. I can't feel my face. How can I be funny? Well, Jim managed to pull it off. I forever respect that man.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's an iconic film. When you guys were working on that project, did you realize that it would be an iconic Christmas film? Because you're right, like it's based off of a short Dr. Seuss story, which everybody knows Dr. Seuss, but did you happen to know that it was going to be what it is now, 20 somewhat years later, where now it's a staple at Christmas time? Everybody has to watch it.
Nathanael, the answer is yes. When you walked onto the set and you saw the production value and you read the script, you heard the laughter, you saw Jim doing his shtick. Other actors were really good. Molly Shannon was great, and I'm going to brain lock now. Christine Baranski played the love interest. She was wonderful. Jeffrey Tambor as the mayor was wonderful. It was the whole, every day on the set, it was fun. And Ron, as a filmmaker, he translated that to the screen. Great editing, great funny stuff, funny dialogue. A couple of writers from Seinfeld, they came in to kind of work as punch-up writers. They work with Jim, and of course Jim has a lot of input on what's funny, and Ron directed it, and it was just, I'm real proud of it. Yeah, I knew it was going to be, and then the audience reaction, they loved Jim. So yeah, it's really nice because listen, residual checks still come in, which is really, to have a perennial hit, to know that every year there's going to be an $1,100 residual bump from Universal just for the Grinch. It's, I'm glad I participated. I'm glad Ron hired me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I want to learn a little bit about you now in terms of we just talked about Jim Carrey. Your role in Apollo 13, I've heard rumors that you worked with legit space engineers and technicians to prepare for that role. Can you talk to me about the preparation?
Oh, we all did. It wasn't just me. They listen. Ron and Tom Hanks, and Todd Hollowell, and Brian Grazer, they all knew this was a heavyweight movie. So Universal gave them the resources to. We went to space camp. All the actors, literally, the technical advisors that were there on the set for a week. We showed up, no cameras. We learned how to be mission controllers. We knew, we learned how to behave in the mocha. And I got to meet and become friends with the guy I played in the movie, a guy named Cy Liebergott. He was not officially a technical advisor on the movie, but he was very giving as far as the attitude of the men. And I'm sorry to say, it was all men at the time. There were no women that worked at mission control. Ron would have certainly, if there would have been women there, Ron would have had women. And so there was just cigarette smoking men. We were, all our chests were killing us. Me and Ed Harris one time, we were talking about, about all the smoking we were doing. He was smoking non-filtered Lucky Strikes, and I was taking cigarette tobacco and smoking it in a pipe. We were all way overdoing the whole nicotine thing. But we had technical advisors: Jerry Griffin, Jerry Bostick, Dave Scott were our three main guys. Now, Dave Scott, who was there every day on the set, he was the first man to drive on the moon. Now, to be able to sit and have a conversation with a man who was the first man to drive on the moon is something that, I would have paid for that. They were paying me. They were paying me to be there. And yet I would have paid them. Don't tell anybody I said that. But it was just a great experience. And it started, and we heard from all the flight controllers, the people that were technical advisors, that they were the former NASA people were very leery of Apollo 13 because somebody had done a TV movie about NASA before, and it was terrible. They hated it. It wasn't truthful. It was all just soap opera. It was bullshit, and they were reluctant. They were reluctant to jump on board until they learned of the attitude that Ron had, that all of us had. Tom Hanks, especially, was a champion of let's get it right. We don't need to do anything out of the ordinary. We don't need to do anything. This doesn't need to be like Cowboys in Space. It doesn't need to be a rodeo. It doesn't need to be heroic. It was men solving a problem. And my goodness, what a thing that the mission control did. And one thing that Jim Lovell told me and the other astronauts, Dave Scott, said, listen, they called society called the astronauts heroes. They were just doing what they were told. They didn't
Right.
invent anything in space. What was invented was down at Houston and at the other space facilities that NASA ran. Grumman, all of these different people, very smart people, came together when computers were in its infancy. So they weren't relying on any kind of artificial intelligence. They were using computers to solve problems, but also, and this is a true story, on the floor in mission control were the slide rule. And there were engineers figuring out mathematical equations by hand, using a
On the
slide
fly.
rule. So, it just blows me away. And, at conventions, at pop things, where I'm at now, the Cherry Blossom Festival in Marshfield, Missouri, people are going to ask me what was my favorite movie. And by far, it's Apollo 13.
Mm.
This is not
Yeah.
this is not a Terrifier crowd down here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that enjoyed Terrifier 3, but primarily it's going to be, I'm guessing here, check me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing that Marshfield, Missouri is going to be in love with the Andy Griffith Show, Gentle Ben, Apollo 13, and maybe there might be a few Water Boys and a few Austin Powers.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? You've been around the country enough and done these enough to know what's niche fits what and who likes what. Yeah, I'm sure. So let's wrap up with Terrifier 3 and Rob Zombie films like 3 from Hell that you've also worked on. So transitioning into some of your darker projects, you were also in Halloween. Terrifier 3 is debatably the most gruesome movie of all time. You've heard stories about people leaving the theater because it was too graphic and it was too much. So, how insane was it to be on a project like that? And can you talk about the vibes of working on a horror set compared to a comedy? Because I think when you think of horror set, you think it's this dark, gloomy project, but yet you go ahead and they say cut, and then everybody's laughing and making jokes and all this other stuff. So can you talk about some of those vibes and what it's like?
Well, you nailed it. You yell cut, and people start laughing about how much blood they've got on them, and it ain't blood, of course. It's
Yeah.
corn syrup, red food dye, and a little bit of soap, because they learned over the years you got to put a few drops of soap in your blood concoction because then it washes out. See, if you
Oh,
don't put the
interesting.
soap in when you make the concoction, it's basically corn syrup, a couple of different kinds of red food coloring, uh, and then there's one other ingredient that I'm missing to make it thick and really rich, like the way show business blood needs to be. But they drop a little soap in there because then you can wash it right out, no problem at all. But here's Nathaniel. Here's the thing that it's obvious when you're on the set, you don't hear music. And one remarkable thing about movies, television, is how much the music influences you.
Mm.
And if you watch a movie without the sound, you're not going to be nearly emotionally attached to the images that you are when you
Right.
hear the creepy music or the frightening music or whatever it is. Music adds so much. Music and sound add so much, and you just don't have it when you're doing it. And also, and this has been my whole life. I'm in on the magic trick. I know how they do it. It's just
Yeah.
an illusion, you know. And the illusions have gotten a little trickier over the years with AI and CGI, and the things that they can do now. They can make Spider-Man look like he literally is Spider-Maning across the skyscrapers of New York City. And no, it ain't a guy. It ain't, when Tom Cruise is in Mission Impossible 8 or whatever, when he's got the parachute on and he's got the motorcycle on and he's about ready to go off the cliff, and he actually revs that motorcycle and it looks like that Tom Cruise is getting ready to do his own stunt. Well, yeah, he is doing his own stunt. What he's doing is he's taking that motorcycle and he is jumping onto a big pad. A big pad. Yes, a stunt can be a guy jumping 3 feet onto a pad. So he's not lying by saying he did his own stunts, but he didn't do the stunt where he literally goes 3,000 feet down the thing until the parachute, opens and he navigates to the floor. No, no, no. It's just an illusion. Just like Terrifier 3 was an illusion. Now, at the end result, and Damien Leone and that whole team that made those movies, Christian Tinsley and his makeup crew, they did a bang up job. Now I'll let you in on a secret. They didn't do a lot of CG in Terrifier 3. They did a little bit, but they didn't do a lot. The blood was all real. The gore was all real. They didn't use real chainsaws, but of course they make it look like they're really chainsawing a guy in half. It, you know, it was when you watch it, like my wife, Kat, she has a hard time watching that stuff. She does. In fact, one of our first dates was to see the premiere of Three from Hell.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
told me
That's
right
another
away,
one.
she goes, I can't, I'm gonna bury my head in your shoulder because I can't watch. And I go, don't worry, I'm looking away too. Because listen, I was entertained by Terrifier 3. I was not entertained by Three from Hell. I appreciate
Mm.
Rob's work and I understand the kind of movie he was making, but real life, real life, brutal, grotesque, human destruction and horror and death is not entertaining to me. So,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't, and I participated in it. I'll never forget when Rob called me and said, "I've got this great part for you in this movie that I'm doing, and you're going to play this clown that inadvertently walks into a home invasion, and he's going to get killed." So I show up to the front door of this house thinking I'm going to a 12-year-old's birthday party. Well, hello, you must be the lady of the house, and it's not. It's Otis, and
Yeah.
he's got a gun on me, and he calls me in, and I had this. Rob gives me this wonderful opportunity to do this scene where I'm entertaining all these hostages, and I'm entertaining these killers, and they tell me that if I make them laugh, I'm free to go. So I'm doing my best to do my act, and I fail, and he goes up to kill me, and so he's got the gun to my head, and I pee myself, and he laughs, and I go, "You laughed? Am I free to go?" And he goes, "Yeah, to clown heaven," and he shoots me in the head. It was a
Mm-hmm.
great scene. In fact, as much as my wife had a hard time watching it, it's her favorite scene of mine in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think when I was younger, I was like super into horror movies and I loved all of them. And I think as I've gotten older, I have a harder time being entertained by them. I don't know if it's because I understand, like you said, the brutal realities of the world now more now so than when I was younger. But Yeah, because even Rob Zombie's Halloween, some of those other projects, I enjoyed them when I was younger, and now I watch them. Three from Hell is another one that I'm like, oh, yeah, that was okay. Yeah, I did like, but Terrifier 3, it was your scene in particular was a little bit more entertaining, just because it was like more tongue in cheek. It was like they like it was just a few guys just working, drinking, you all casuals at the bar. Like there wasn't, and I think Santa had a little bit more worse than what you and the bartender had. But even you guys, like I think I saw a picture on your Instagram of you guys all like happy and laughing, and so it goes to show, like, just like when they say cut, it is just a job, and you guys are just telling a story, and sometimes the story isn't always cute and fun and pretty, and sometimes it's as gruesome as that.
Well, listen, it's just a movie.
Yeah.
It's just a campfire story.
Hmm.
It's not campfire reality. It's a campfire story,
Yeah.
and I give all the credit on that one, on Terrifier 3, all the whole Terrifier series. I give credit to Damien Leone, what he invented and molded and created is one of a kind, and it's brilliant work, and I so admire him, and he's a really nice guy, and his partner, you know, his producing partner is a wonderful, wonderful man, Phil Falcone. And then the guy, Phil Falcone, is a great dude. He was Damien's partner, and he doesn't look like a movie producer. He doesn't want to look like a movie producer, and he loves life, and he loves doing what he's doing. And Phil Falcone is a guy you should have on because he's just a beautiful, beautiful guy. Uh, but then also, okay, not only Damien, but David Howard Thornton playing Art the Clown. We become friends with him, and he's a wonderful guy. He's a neighbor. He lives in Burbank. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. But getting to spend time with him and working with him was the man is really, really talented, and inventing and bringing Art the Clown to the surface and giving him nuance without saying a word is what absolutely mesmerizing. And I remember that day. Well, I think I worked on that show for a couple of days, but the one day in particular was with the scene where he jumps in Santa's lap and pees. And I'm like right here. He's right here next to me. We're sitting in a bar. It's like, Art the Clown walks into a bar. You meet Santa Claus. What's going to happen? I mean, this is a great setup. It's Damien Leone's favorite scene in the movie, too. I think it's a lot of people's favorite scene in the movie because it's pretty normal. But getting to watch David work up close and personal was a great, it's a top 10 moment in my career because, I'd seen his work on screen. I knew what he had done with Art the Clown. I saw him at conventions, just absolutely killing it, getting his picture taken with fans. I mean, everybody wanted their picture taken with Art the Clown, and that's wonderful. But yet, getting to see him work, I go, he's a winner. He's a winner. What he did, and I've asked him. I go, the first time you played Art the Clown, was there any direction in the script? What? And he goes, no, there was no direction. Art the Clown was just literally a clown. That is all. The entire thing was invented by David Howard Thornton with the encouragement of Damien Leone and Phil Falcone. And of course, David has helps. The makeup is brilliant. They give him the right environment. Damien does a great job editing the movies. And, again, I can't wait to see Terrifier 4. I'm rooting somehow that Damien finds a way to have Smokey come back or have maybe Smokey has a brother or something. I would love to be in another one. I'm wearing that very lightly because I understand that's probably not going to happen. And we've joked about it and stuff. Me and Damien have joked about it, but I'll be very happy. I will be the first person there at the premiere, with or without a part in the movie, to celebrate Terrifier 4. Look what's happened. They started out making a little thing for $60,000. Then they spent a little more money making a small little movie for a couple of $100,000. And then they got a little more investment money and they made Terrifier 3. And it made almost $100 million in the movie theaters alone. That they weren't even expecting to get a theatrical release. And not only did they get a theatrical release, it made $90 million. And then the conglomerate known as Universal Studios wants to make a maze, and they make a Terrifier maze, and they load it into their Halloween attraction that they do every year, which is Universal's best piece of business. They do that, and this little tiny movie that started out as a $60,000 experiment ended up now playing mainstream for Universal Studios, you know, and that's what we're kind of hoping to do a little bit with Ice Cream Man. That's when we make another Ice Cream Man. In fact, we did have a conversation with the people at Universal Studios, and they seem to be very excited about the future of another Ice Cream Man and wanting to add it to the pantheon of their what they do, which is Halloween Horror Nights. So anyway, that's listen. It's refreshing for us to see a win like what happened with Terrifier. And it really makes you
Right.
want to go out and make a movie.
Yeah, because here's this, and this isn't discrediting what they've done. Here's this small project, and it becomes a titan in the industry, and you wouldn't expect it to have. So the fact that they were able to do that just goes to show that they've got great people, they casted the right people, they're working with the right people. And yeah, the fact that now it's a mainstream pop culture icon. I mean, he's in Call of Duty, he's in video games. Art the Clown is everywhere you turn. So,
Yeah.
they cooked something right. So good. Yeah, great.
Touchdown.
Clint, thank you again for your time. I appreciate you doing that, especially spending your birthday week here with me. It means a lot. I've got to say, at this point, you're officially sworn into the Reyes Reflection for life, so there's no backing out now. Go ahead and plug yourself in where people can find you so they can stay in touch, watching another Ice Cream Man, all that stuff.
All right. Well, listen, I'm Clint Howard, and our Instagram page is Clint Howard Official. I am Clint Howard on Facebook, but primarily we use Instagram as our form of communication with the public. And it's going to be, we're making this movie, Another Ice Cream Man, which you can follow along through Instagram. And I'm sure you're going to find out other ways to follow the movie. So just, I appreciate the fans that follow us and want to, and want to be entertained, and our aim is to entertain.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time. For everyone listening, make sure you check out the episode bio for our sponsor deals. We have great ones. And as always, may you live, may you love, and may you thrive. I'm Oprah as a dude, and I love you all.